Welcome back to part 21 of the video on elementary logic for first year BA LLB from Mumbai University, semester 1. This is as per the syllabus provided by Mumbai University. In this video, I am making a slight change. This is from module number, this is module 3. I'm covering in brief all the topics from the module 3 for time being, and then I'll expand in sub videos about each different terms and concepts. So let's start with the module 3, inference. So we are going to study about inference and kinds of inference, which are basically of two types, immediate and mediate. Now what is an inference? Inference is the process of deriving or coming to or drawing a logical conclusion from one or more premises. So this is what inference means. So we come to a conclusion. So conclusion from one or more than one premises. So when we draw a conclusion or when we come to a conclusion from these premises, that process, that relationship is known as conclusion. So basically inference is the process of deriving or drawing a logical conclusion from one or more premises. It is a fundamental tool in logical reasoning and legal arguments to determine relationships between statements and established truth. So the more important point in this is we use the process of inference to determine relationship between the statements, that is these three premises or more than one premises, and thereafter establish the truth of the conclusion or of the premises itself also. Now let us look at what is immediate inference. In immediate inference, a conclusion is drawn directly from a single premise. So we don't need multiple premises for drawing a conclusion. From one premise, we straight away draw a conclusion without the need for additional premises. So this is the most important definition for immediate inference. In immediate inference, only one premise is needed to draw a conclusion. No additional premises are required. That is, a conclusion is drawn directly from a single premise. What are the types of immediate inference? The immediate inference are conversion, obversion, contraposition. These are the three types of immediate inference. Let's look at conversion. Conversion involves interchanging the subject and the predicate. The rule for that is it is valid only for the E and the I proposition. So earlier, in the earlier videos, I had drawn the square table A, E, I, O. So these are the different type of proposition. A stands for universal affirmative, E stands for universal negative, I stands for particular affirmative, which is some, R, and O stands for some are not. This is what it means. So in the immediate inference for conversion, basically the conversion process involves only the E proposition and the I proposition. Now in the conversion, we can convert the E proposition to E proposition. This is a simple conversion proposition basically, and I will be converted to I proposition. E will be converted to E proposition, I will be converted to I proposition. Just bear with me, stay with me, you'll understand this. It's a very easy thing. The rules have to be understood first. So now what we have to do is we have to interchange the subject and the predicate. For example, For example, we have this table. Let me draw the table again. A, E, I, and O. Alright, so A stands for all, E stands for no, I stands for some, and O stands for some are not. And this one stands for some are. And this stands for, let me just erase this. This stands for all. This stands for no. Now, this all is universal affirmative. The E is universal negative. I is particular affirmative, and this is particular negative. Alright, so now all universal affirmative is one proposition, no universal negative is another proposition. Let me make it smaller so that everything can be included in one photo. Alright, so all this would be universal positive, no universal negative. So what kind of statements are we making in this? Let me just type it out here. So one is all S are P. The same thing, the same statement will be written here as no S are P. And the same statement as of A will get converted or changed to some S are P. And the same A proposition will be changed to some S are not P. I mentioned here earlier, some S are not P, some S are P. Okay, so S stands for subject, P stands for predicate. So this is how you convert. Now, coming back to conversion. So in the conversion, only A can be converted, only E and I can be converted in the conversion process. This is simple conversion. And what are the rules for that conversion? I'll explain later. So right now, E and I can be converted. E can be converted to E, I can be converted to I. Let's take an example. So, as I said, E and I can be converted. So conversion can happen. So how will it happen? When we say no SRP, we can also say the same thing in conversion. The converse of no SRP is no P R S. Both are valid. No P R S, and the converse of that no SRP, the converse of that is no PRS. Now if we use the Venn diagram, so I can show you in this way. No S, all members of the class S are not connected with all members of the class P. So nothing of S is in P, and therefore nothing of P is also in S. It is not there. Both of them are not connected. So same statement we can write it in a converse by saying that no PRS. So in this rule, the rule is that there are two rules in this. The first rule is for the E conversion is interchange the subject and the predicate in the converse. That is, this is the main statement or the original statement, and in the converse what we are doing is we are replacing the subject with the predicate and the predicate of the original with the subject of the original. In the converse, I'll repeat again, in the converse the subject part, this part, is replaced by the predicate of the original, and in the converse the predicate part, the second part, is replaced by the subject of the original. So we are interchanging in the converse. So as becomes P, that is so wherever there is subject we replace it by the predicate, and then we use the same E quantification, that is no. So no SRP, no PRS, and this is valid. We can say the same statement in converse by interchanging the subject and predicate. I hope this is clear. If not, let me know in the comment section. Now, coming back to the I part. Some SRP, so automatically the converse of this will be some, since we have to interchange the subject and predicate, we'll say some P R S. Now, both the statements are still true. Both are true. And both have the same meaning. The meaning has not changed. So this is what we use it. Well, this is what we use converse for, to say one thing in multiple ways. So if we are using converse, we can use the E and the I proposition, that converse works with E and I, whereas for A proposition can only be converted to, or it gets converse into I only, and it will still be valid. So this is partial conversion. So how does this work? Alright, so A proposition, if we have to do converse of the A proposition, it will be, first of all, what we do is we replace subject with predicate and predicate with subject. Okay, and before that, instead of all, we use some. Now, just check if it's still making sense. All S are P, and some P are S. So it is making. Now, both all S are P and its converse, some P are S, is still making sense. But it is only one way, from A to I. So, to recap, in the converse, the first rule is interchange the subject with the predicate and the predicate with the subject. So the two rules are that first we interchange the subjects and the predicates, and then E proposition will be kept in E proposition only for converse, and I proposition will remain in I proposition only. That is, some will remain some, no will remain no. All will go to I. A will go to I proposition. That is, all will go to some proposition. I given all the examples. Some SRP, converse would be some PRS. But if A has to be converted, all SRP will be converted to some PRS. Now, O is not valid. We cannot do that with O. So, O is doubtful or cannot be converted. Alright, this is for the conversion part. Now, it is valid only for E and I proposition conversion. For example, all judges are impartial. This is an A proposition. So, if you have to convert it, A will be converted to I proposition. So, for I, we have some R, and we have to interchange impartial and judges, we have to interchange, right? Predicate and subject, we have to interchange. So some impartial people. Now why do we add people? Because all judges are impartial people, we say. Because it is incomplete, we can add that word. So some impartial people are judges. We have interchanged the subject and the predicate. So these two rules we have to follow for conversion. Now let's move on to obversion. Changing the quality of the proposition and replacing the predicate with its complement. So I'll break it up into two parts. So the thing to understand about obversion is, for obversion, I'll write it like this again, A-E-I-O. In obversion, A gets converted to E proposition. That is, if we have an A proposition and we want to do obverse of it, so we have to write it in E proposition. And if you want to do obverse of E, we have to write it in A proposition. I'll tell you with an example. I'll give you with an example. So if let's say all S R P, that if we want to make an obverse of this, obverse, it will be all will get converted to no. Okay. Second rule is the subject and predicate will not change. So S and P will remain like that only. R will also remain like this only. But now the third rule is the predicate. For the predicate, we have to use its complement. What is a complement? For example, P, non-P. Human being, non-human being. Animal, non-animal, and so on. So you just have to use the word non for the predicate. So we say for the obverse, all will get converted to no. S, R, P will remain like that. But here we have to just add non-P. So this is the conversion rule for, this is the rule for obversion. That is converting from A proposition to E proposition. Similarly, we have to do it for E also, from I to O also. So I'll give you for each of them, I'll give you an example. Alright, first let us understand the obversion. We have to change the quality of the proposition and replace the predicate. The predicate has to be replaced with its complement. Alright, now what are the rules? It is applicable to all the propositions A, E, I, O, whereas in the converse, the above one, it was only applicable to E and I proposition. Whereas for the A proposition, it was converted to I. Now coming back to the obversion part. For example, they're given A. A gets converted to E. So all contracts are binding. So first rule I had mentioned was all will go into E proposition. E starts with no. Contracts are binding will remain like that, and this predicate is to be replaced by its complement. So we have to use non-binding. So no contracts are non-binding. The meaning of both of them are similar and same. Now let us come back and convert all of them here separately. So let us say we start with A proposition. A proposition states all S R P. I hope this is readable. Alright, let me remove it. Okay. all S are P. So to do the conversion of this, conversion, not the obverse, to do the conversion of this, what will we do? We will convert, A gets converted to what? It gets converted to I. And I states what? Sum. And in conversion, another rule was we have to interchange the subject and predicate. So sum P R S. This is the conversion rule. Now, if we want to do obverse of A, if we want to do obverse, A will get converted to E proposition. And E starts with what? No. Next, the second rule for obverse was, let me put it down. Second rule for obverse was, no, the subject and the predicate in obverse does not interchange. So S R P remains like this. But the third rule here was that we have to replace the predicate part with its complement. So complement will be non-P. This is the rule for obverse. So we saw how conversion of A is done. Sorry, this converse. Converse of A is done and obverse of A is done. A obverse is E, A converse is I. Now let's start with the E one. E starts with what? No. No, S R P. The converse, let's start with the converse first. Converse of E is E itself. We saw that earlier. The converse of E is E itself. Now, in converse, we replace the subject and predicate. So, P, R, S. First we write this. And second rule was replace E with E. So, no. So, no SRP and no PRS. They are meaning the same. There is no change in its meaning. Alright. Now, if we want to convert E into its obverse, so that would be A proposition. And A states what? All. Now, second rule for obverse was the subject and the predicate doesn't change, doesn't replace. So, S R P remains like this, but the predicate now will be replaced with non-P. So, the obverse of E is A and the obverse of no SRP is all S are non-P. Now the meaning of both of this is same. You can check both of them, A, E. Now let's move on to the I proposition. I proposition. So what does I start with? I states sum S R P. This is the I proposition. This is particular affirmative. Now converse of I is I itself. We studied that earlier. Converse of I is I. And in converse we interchange the subject and predicate, and so it will be like this: sum P R S. This is the converse. Now what about the obverse of I? The obverse of I is O. I mentioned that earlier. Obverse of I is O. Alright, so in the obverse, what is the rule? The rule was keep the subject and predicate at the same place. Only it will be the predicate will be replaced by its complement. So sum S R not, because O states what? O proposition states sum S R not P. This is the O proposition. But now in this we have to replace the predicate with a complement, that is non-P. I hope my explanation is clear. If there's still doubt, then I would really suggest you go again through the either the textbook or listen to this video again. Still don't understand, let me know in the comment section. I'll try and make it more simple. This is for the I proposition. This is the conversion rule for the obverse and converse. So this was the this was obverse. So I's obverse is O, I's converse is I only. Alright, next is the O proposition. O proposition states some S are not P. What is the converse of this? Converse of O is not possible. So we skip this. But what about obverse? Obverse of O is I proposition. And I states what? Some S R P. This is the actual I proposition, some S R P. But if you want to do it obverse, so we just add non-P. So O proposition states some S are not P, and if you want to make it an obverse of that, we say some S are non-P. The meaning is same, the meaning still remains the same. The second part, the obverse, is a little difficult to immediately grasp, but the meaning is the same. So I have explained the converse and the obverse rule for all the propositions A, E, I, O. Let us look at an actual example for the obversion. All contracts are binding. So this is an A proposition. A gets converted, all gets converted to no. No contracts are non-binding. I hope you have understood this. Let's move on to the third one, contraposition. Interchanging the subject and the predicate. So here in contraposition we have to interchange the subject and the predicate and replacing them with their complements. This is valid for A and O proposition only. Example, original statement or proposition is all valid laws are enforceable. This is A. So A gets converted to A. All unenforceable things, because you have to replace them with their complements. Now let us also understand what is a complement. But first let's go through the example. First thing is we have to replace the subject and interchange the subject and predicate. So this comes the predicate becomes the subject, so it becomes the subject. Unenforceable things are invalid, so valid becomes invalid, enforceable becomes unenforceable. So we had two things. Earlier we learnt about its complement, non-P. Now here too we have to replace it with their complements only by replacing the subject and the predicate. But here we have to replace both the subject and the predicate. In the obversion we only did the complement of the predicate, whereas in the contraposition we do complement of both the subject and the predicate, and we also interchange them, whereas in the obversion we don't interchange the subject and predicate. I hope you got it. In contraposition, the subject and predicate are interchanged, as well as both of them are replaced with their complements. That is, all non-enforceable things are non-valid laws. So instead of saying non-enforceable, we say unenforceable. And instead of saying non-valid, we say invalid. It is as simple as that. Once again, I hope this is understood. Now, what are the rules for A? A we understood. A will be replaced by A only. And what about the O proposition? Let's check that. Actually, we do not have contraposition for our syllabus for SEM 1. So we'll skip this for time being and move on to the mediate inferences. Now, what is a mediate inference? In mediate inference, we need two or more premises to draw a conclusion. Whereas in the immediate inference, which we studied earlier, we need only one premise to draw or come to a conclusion. Now let us look at types of mediate. So basically two or more premises is the keyword. Types of mediate inference. Syllogisms. Syllogisms is basically deductive reasoning with a major and a minor premise leading to a conclusion. So we have a major premise plus a minor premise. It's a major and minor. Major premise, minor premise to come to a conclusion. So we need more than one premise to come to a conclusion. Whereas in the immediate, we needed only one premise to come to the conclusion directly. Example, major premise. All laws are rules. This is a proposition. Minor proposition is all rules are also enforceable. That is also a premise. The conclusion, all laws are enforceable. This is also an a proposition. Hope this one is clear. This is the mediate inference because we need more than one premise to come to the conclusion. So this is one premise, this is the second premise, and this is the conclusion. Alright, let's look at the hypothetical syllogisms. A conditional argument where premises contain if-then statement. So if you have a statement or a proposition which is in the format of if-then, then that is known as hypothetical syllogisms. It's a conditional argument. Premises. Let's understand this through an example. If it rains, it's a hypothetical situation. It is not raining, but we are saying if it rains, the ground will be wet, or I will carry an umbrella. And if the ground is wet, traffic will slow down, or there will be more traffic. So this is a second example of hypothetical syllogisms. Here we have one premise, second premise. Okay, to come to the conclusion, if it rains, traffic will slow or slow down. Disjunctive syllogism. Inference from premises containing either or statement. This is disjunctive syllogisms. In the hypothetical syllogisms, we used if then. In the disjunctive syllogisms, we use either or. Premises. Example. Let's understand this through an example. Either the contract is void or it is valid, and the contract is not valid. Therefore, the conclusion is the contract is void. I hope this is very clear through the example itself. Let's look at the second part of the topic, which is opposition of propositions. This is the table I had drawn earlier of A, E, I, O. Okay. Opposition of proposition describes the logical relationships between propositions with same subject and predicate but differing in quantity or quality. Let's read this again. Opposition of propositions describes the logical relationships between propositions with the same subject and predicate but differing in quality or quantity. It will become more simple when we look at all the examples. Now, What are the types of opposition? There are four types: contrary, contradictory, subcontrary, and subalternation. This will become more simple when I explain it through a diagram. Let me get the diagram now. Okay, so this is the diagram for opposition of propositions. Now we have placed the A proposition on the left side. So we do it like this: A, E, I, and O. The relation between A and O is of contradictory, that is contradiction. Similarly, between E and I and E, both ways, it is again of contradiction. So the opposite of A is O, opposite of O is A, so they have a contradiction relation. Similarly, E and I and E also have contradictory relation. A and E have contrary relation, whereas I and O have subcontrary relation. I'll explain each of them as we move forward. The relation between A and I is one directional, that is from A to I, not the reverse way. This is of subaltern relation. Similarly, E to O relation is subaltern relation. So once you have understood this diagram, this chart, it will become very easy. Now let's move back here. So let us see the types of oppositions. Contrary. This is between the A, that is universal affirmative, and E, universal negative. Between A and E is the contrary relation between universal affirmative and universal negative. Both cannot be true, but both can be false. This will become more clear when we look at the examples. But let's come here and see. Let us see if I say for the A proposition, all S are P. At the same time, I cannot say no S are P. So because they will be contrary to each other. But both can be false. As I said, going down later on, we'll look at the examples. Contradictory. The contradictory relation is between A and O, which I explained earlier, and between E and I. One is always true, the other is always false. So if A is true, O will be false. If O is false, A will be true. If E is true, I will be false, that is I proposition will be false. And if I proposition is true, the O proposition will be false. They are contradictory to each other. In this, one is true and the other is always false. Whereas in the contrary, both cannot be true, but both can be false. Alright, next is subcontrary. This is between I and the O proposition, that is particular affirmative and particular negative. Both can be true, but both cannot be false. This also I explained. This is some S what is the I proposition? Some S R P. So this is not this type of Venn diagram represents what? It represents the E proposition. Okay, so we are looking at the I proposition right now. I proposition states some S R P. So relation between subcontrary is between the I proposition and O proposition. So it says some S R P, both can be true. So both ways, some P are S and some S are P. Both can be true, but both cannot be false. This we will learn through more in the truth table. Subalternation. This is between universal and the particular proposition A to I and E to O. Truth flows downward. Falsity flows upward. From A to I, not the reverse way. So if I say all S are P, I can say some S are P, both it will be true. The statement will be true. Similarly for E, no S are P, and for the O it will be no S are not P. So meaning will be the same. This is the subalternation. So we have to understand how the truth flows. Opposition of a singular proposition. Singular propositions do not allow for subalternation but can exhibit contrary and contradictory relations. This I'll explain later. Inference by opposition. Use the truth values to determine the possible truth of related propositions. Example, if all lawyers are ethical and is false, the statement is false, then some lawyers are not ethical. O must be true. This is what it's trying to say. If A is false in the A proposition, then the O must be true because they are what? Contradictory. They are contradictory relation. So if one is true, the other has to be false. If A is true, if all lawyers are ethical, then the O will be false. If all lawyers are ethical, then we cannot say then that some lawyers are not ethical. That will become false. And if this is false, then this will become true. Next, let us look at eductions or adduction and types of eduction. So I'll just say eduction only because most of them pronounce it as eduction. Definition of an eduction. Eduction involves deriving equivalent statements from a given proposition. Eduction involves deriving equivalent statements from a given proposition. That is, one proposition is given, one statement is given, and we are changing that proposition, that statement into an equivalent statement. But we are saying one thing in another way without changing its meaning. So there are different types of eductions. One is conversion, obversion, obverted converse, contrapositive, and inverse. I already spoke about and explained these two, the conversion and the obversion. Conversion switches the subject and predicate, which I had explained earlier, and it is valid for E and I. For A gets converted or converse of A is I. But for E, the converse of E is E and converse of I is I proposition. But for A proposition, the converse is I. That's it. And for O, it is not valid. Obversion changes the quality and the predicate's complement, and it is valid for all, meaning A's obverse is E, E's obverse is A, I's obverse is O, and O's obverse is I. It is valid for all of them. And the predicate will be changed to its complement. So, for example, if the predicate is P, its complement will be non-P. And in obversion, the subject and the predicate are not interchanged, like how it is done in the converse. Instead, the predicate is replaced by its complement, and if it is a preposition, it is replaced by the e preposition. This I have explained in detail in this video itself earlier. Obverted, converse, contrapositive and inverse. Obverted converse is a combination of converse and obverse. So first, if you want obverted converse of say a preposition, what we have to do is first we have to convert it into converse. We have to move it into converse proposition, and then of the converse we have to make obverse. So it will become obverted converse. So it says, sorry, it's a reverse way around. Apply obversion and then conversion. So first we have to apply obversion and then conversion. So it is called obverted converse. So first word is obverted, so O, conversion C. I hope obverted converse is simple, because once you know the first and the second one, obverted converse is very simple. So the A preposition, A's obverse is what I've shown here. A's obverse is E, and E's converse, this is the up one, E's converse is E only. Maybe going forward I'll show example of each of them. Contrapositive. In contrapositive, we reverse the terms and complement both. For example, all, A, R, P. So we reverse them. In contrapositive, we reverse the terms. So all, P, R, A, but now we have to complement both subject and predicate. So we say all non-P are non-A. We will look at it in more detail for the contrapositive. In inverse, we replace both the subject and the predicate with complements. Here we have to reverse. So with examples, it will become more clear for contrapositive and inverse. Next, let's move on to 3.4, other immediate inferences. Material observation. Here we alter the predicate without changing the quality. For example, all men are mortal becomes no men are immortal. So what we are doing is we are altering the predicate without changing the quality. So all men will become no men are immortal. So this we'll understand with more examples in the exercise that I'll be putting in. Inference by added determinants. Here adding specific qualifiers to the subject or predicate. So the main part is specific qualifiers. What is specific qualifiers? Example, lawyers argue becomes some experienced lawyers argue. Either it is added to the subject or it is added to the predicate. Or lawyers argue becomes some experienced lawyers argue. Inference by complex conceptions. Combining attributes for inference. Example, a lawyer argues leads to a skilled lawyer argues. So this is complex conceptions. What are the rules for this? We'll study later on in the next video. Inference by converse relation. This uses the relation to infer equivalent statement. John is taller than Sam implies Sam is shorter than John. This should be very simple to understand. It is just a relation to infer equivalent statement. I am tall means I am not short. That is how I can say it. So this completes the inference and logic part 20. and the different kind of inferences, which are the immediate and mediate. This video has become a little longer. I hope it helps you in making the concepts of logic much more clearer. Thank you very much for listening. If you have stayed for the end of the video, till the end of the video, do consider subscribing, sharing with your friends. Thank you. Bye bye.